Hi everyone, and welcome to Unco, a podcast about what's unusual in tech. I'm your host, Timothy Buck, and this week I sat down with an editor from 9to5Mac and 9to5Google, Peter Cao. We discussed what's good and bad about the HomePod, and Peter brought an audiophile's perspective to the topic. We also chatted about declining software quality at Apple, the delay of Airplay 2, and one thing that Peter finds unusual in tech right now. Hi, Peter. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going? It's nice to be on a podcast again.
Yeah, glad to have you on. So for the people who follow me who don't know who you are, can you give just a little bit of a introduction?
Yeah, I'm a podcaster, or was a podcaster. I've had two shows in the past. Jailbreaking for All and Apple Core are my two podcasts. You can probably find one of those on iTunes. I'm not going to tell you which one. And I also write. I am currently writing for 9to5Mac and 9to5Google.
How did you end up writing for them?
It's a long story, but just to sum it up, consistency and persistence is what you need to get into this industry. And I've been doing that for 5 years, and sometimes it's rough. I'm not gonna lie, it takes a lot of time and effort to do. But once you have that history out there, you just start networking with people, and that's basically how I got to 9to5Mac.
It's really cool, man. So I asked you on the show because I saw on Twitter that you bought quite a few HomePods. How many exactly did you buy?
I told you at the time I had... Okay, so here's the story on that. I started with 2 for the pre-order, went to the Apple store, and walked out with 5. I believe I told you I had 4, but I ended up walking out.
Yeah, you told me 4.
I ended up walking out with 5 of them. I currently have 5, all in white, because space gray looks horrible to me, and white works better where I am right now.
Yeah, we have a white one at our house too. I really like the way it looks. So I guess the question people listening are probably asking themselves is, why would you buy 5 of these all at the same time?
My main reason for buying more than one is just Siri everywhere. I believe in the fact that I want Siri everywhere in my home, mostly because I have HomeKit, and HomeKit runs throughout the house. So being able to just yell, "Hello Siri," wherever is something that I was interested in, and so far so good.
So I was going to kind of jump into the audiophile perspective, but because you brought up Siri, how are you finding Siri so far on the HomePod?
I know this is a thing that a lot of people like to hate on, Siri's being the worst of the smart assistants out there. But for me, Siri works well because I only use it for 2 things on a HomePod. One, requesting music or turning up the volume, music stuff, which I'm Apple Music subscriber, so that works out for me. And the other thing would be HomeKit, like I mentioned before. My home is heavily invested in HomeKit, so being able to just ask Siri whatever is something that's interested in me. I know people have a beef with timers on HomePod, not being able to set more than 1 timer. I personally never run into this issue. Maybe it's because I don't really cook, so.
Yeah, that would make sense. So we have an Echo Dot in our kitchen. We have Blue Apron, so we cook, at least 3 meals a week. And those usually have multiple things that you're having to cook at the same time. And so because of that, we do set multiple timers pretty regularly. But our house ended up being we have the HomePod in the living room, but then we also kind of have the Echo Dots elsewhere that we just, like in the kitchen, we, ask it to set timers, and that's pretty much it. In our bedroom, we have it turn on and off the lights and check the weather, and that's pretty much it. And then we have another one in the living room that we haven't used since we got the HomePod in there, because we just use the HomePod for music and lights. And yeah, I kind of have a similar reaction to you. I definitely understand people's beef with Siri. It sometimes can be really frustrating. And I don't like how Apple had such a lead in this by several years compared to Amazon and Google. And then they've at least let them catch up, and especially Google Assistant, it seems like they've allowed it to surpass Siri. Have you tried any of the other devices? Have you tried the Echoes, or have you tried Google Home?
See, here's why I think, at least this is why I justified getting more than 1 HomePod, is because I haven't tried Amazon Echo or Google Home. So
yeah, that makes sense.
This would be my first time having a smart assistant.
I got the Echo
everywhere.
Dots because there was a deal on Amazon at some point, and I got 3 of them for, I don't know, some ridiculously low amount of money. I feel like I paid like $25 each for them. And so with it that low, I was like, okay, well, this is worth trying out. And I was immediately frustrated that I didn't have Apple Music on it, because I did want to use them to, you can tether them. That's coming to the HomePod as well. But obviously the speaker quality isn't very high, but it's still convenient. But I don't really like Amazon Music. Oftentimes when we asked them to play something, it would say, we don't have this on Amazon Music, or in the free version, you have to pay to get this song. And I didn't want to pay twice, because my wife and I both use Apple Music all the time, and we didn't want to switch from that.
See, here's my thing with Amazon is I like the diversity in their lineup. And personally, I've run into a couple of, not issues, but scenarios where I feel like I don't really want a full-sized HomePod like we do now, but like something smaller, like an Echo Dot, where I can like leave it in like a hallway or somewhere, and I could just have Siri talk to me. But for me, rounding this all out, audio quality is still the most important thing to me. So I don't think either Amazon Echo or Google Home suit me, because I've listened to both of them before and I didn't like either of them.
Have you heard the Google Home Max? I know that is the one that's kind of more of a competitor to the HomePod and is a similar price. Have you had a chance to listen to that?
I've heard it, and the only thing it has going for it is it's louder than HomePod.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'd heard and what I'd read, but I haven't actually listened to one in person. I know it's quite a bit larger. It's at least 2 times the size, if not more, and that's probably why it can get louder.
Yeah, right now, speaking of HomePod, with the lack of Airplay too, I'm currently hacking 2 HomePods together through Airfoil to get stereo working, and I gotta say, it's pretty convincing. However, it does have some quirks to it. It's unfortunate that Airplay 2 isn't available yet, and looks like it won't be available for a while due to the removal of the feature in the latest betas Apple is offering.
Yeah, I saw that just like yesterday or something. That was a little surprising, because it has been in the beta for a while.
Yeah, I mean, that's what ultimately had me try out Airfoil, because before that, I was hoping that Apple would just bring stereo like flat out to the HomePod when 11.3 dropped, but it doesn't look like that's the case anymore. So I gotta say, hold on, Siri just went off somewhere. But yeah, stereo it's convincing with Airfoil. It's a hack. I wouldn't recommend it, but it does work.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is the first time I've really heard anything about Airfoil. It's just a third-party app that allows you to do really an Airplay 2 type putting together of HomePods. Is that a good description of it?
Somewhat. So basically what this is what you need to do is basically you download the app on your Mac. You duplicate the app. So there's 2 instances of it. You run both instances. And with one instance, you tell it to do left channel. And the other instance, you tell it to do right channel.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of how it works. Is it's 2 separate versions of the app that don't really know that there's 2 versions running.
Okay. And this is only working on a Mac. It doesn't work from your phone or whatever.
No, it has to be running on a Mac. Or, I mean, I guess it could also run on Windows too if you really want to go there. Another thing I want to note is the 2-second delay with Airplay, which means this basically only works with audio since it's routing it through Airfoil. So like an app like iTunes thinks you're just running it through the internal speakers on your machine, so it's not accommodating for the 2-second delay. So if you're trying to watch like a music video or a movie through iTunes, the audio will be 2 seconds behind.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, I don't think I would want to deal with that.
But
I'm just going to stick with one
just
for now.
Music though, which is great.
So I think you're a kind of a self-proclaimed audiophile. I think on your Twitter bio it says that you're a recovering audiophile.
Yeah.
So what can you give, a little bit more perspective of the HomePod's audio as somebody who knows a whole lot more about audio than I do, or most of my listeners do? So
basically what it boils down to not get too technical here, is the HomePod is using what is called the Fletcher-Munson curve, which most manufacturers try to aim for, which is basically like this neutral or like flat sound that a lot of audiophiles want. Basically meaning there's no like color to the sound, so it sounds just as the artist intended it to. And for me, I personally like that. it's a lot of, I mean, I wouldn't call it fun, but like it does reveal some stuff in the song, in some certain songs that will completely ruin your songs forever, admittedly.
What do you mean by that? I don't know that much about audio. So I guess a lot of headphones and speakers, they, will up the bass, or they have some sort of adjustments that they put on all music. And you're saying that the HomePod just basically plays exactly what was recorded, and then that shows issues in things that were originally recorded?
So
Is that
like,
what you're saying?
so it's basically like if you aim for perfection in any, so let me give you a good example here is iPhone displays, right? They're known to be like tuned for perfection. It's like looking at a pixelated image of sorts on a really high resolution display. When it comes to audio, that is tuned for to be neutral or flat. Any issues or flaws in songs that weren't caught when recorded kind of show up on the HomePod, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I know enough about music and recording to even be able to spot, I guess, what you're describing as a pixelated song. That's interesting, though. I think that's a good analogy.
It's not so much audio quality, it's more of like when something is like misaligned in the track, or if something's playing too much louder than everything else, or much quieter than the rest of the track, that becomes more prominent in a speaker or a headphone that's flat or neutral, just like the HomePod is.
But at the same time, that means that if the song was recorded really, really well, then background musicians and different instruments that you may not hear on certain headphones or cheaper speakers are going to be noticeably, you'll be able to notice
they're
them
more present.
Yeah. And that is something that I have noticed in listening to ours. It's like the headphones, I usually just use AirPods for most of my listening, and then other than that, I have the QC35s from Bose that I use when I'm traveling. And so neither one of those is like known for having the best or audiophile level sound quality, but I can definitely tell a difference between what I hear on those and what I hear from the HomePod. And it's been kind of cool. My wife listening to it, and my brother-in-law has been here as well, and he's been listening to it, and they've been really impressed with the sound quality. And you did buy 5 of them, but would you say that sound quality is worth the price that Apple's put on it at $350?
I'd say it's definitely worth the price. If anything, I think Apple's losing money when putting it at $350. I think with the technology put in here, and with the quote unquote smartness with the audio, this thing should be priced at $500-$600 easily. And that's just being like, that's going easy on them. This could easily be $1,000 speaker.
And when you say smartness of the speaker, what are you talking about?
The spatial awareness and basically like all the processing it does to figure out where it is in the room.
I think I understand how that works, but can you describe that?
It's funny, actually. While I'm currently working on a post for 9to5 Mac about this, should be out sometime next week, depending on when this show is released. The HomePod right now, from what I've tested, currently has a bug in the system, which sounds peculiar for something like a speaker, where the post-processing for the audio is not being properly done, so that it's actually being aware of what's going on or what's around it. So, for example, Apple says HomePod should be about 6 to 12 inches away from the wall, which I learned on the first day. More on that later. But it does sound like in certain scenarios, and this is without moving the HomePod itself, so it's staying in one spot, that the sound quality and the sound signature is being moved or being changed quite a bit, even though the HomePod itself is not being moved.
And you're saying that's a bug?
Yes, because like I said, when you place it against a wall, and this is basically what happens, when you place it against a wall, since Apple likes to push the base to the quote-unquote back of the HomePod where the cable is, if you place it against a wall, it'll sound like the HomePod has way more bass than it does, which is what I think is what a lot of Twitter is saying. Social media is saying about HomePod being overly bassy is because they're placing it like on a kitchen counter against the wall, where Apple recommends putting it about 6 to 12 inches away, which would resolve this issue. But in certain scenarios, it sounds like it's up against the wall even though it's in the middle of a room, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually have mine pretty close to a wall. I'll have to move it and see if it sounds any better, like in the middle of the room. I think mine's probably about like 4 inches from the wall. It still sounds pretty good to me.
I gotta ask you, is your HomePod leaving any white rings on your tables?
No, it's not, but it's also on a white table, so nothing is noticeable. Is it for you?
Between all 5 of them, not so far, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I did see a tweet somewhere that showed that the Sonos One does the same thing.
And so does the Google Home Max, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's bad that all of them have that issue. And if anybody should, have higher quality and not have an issue like that, it's Apple. But
I have a way to solve that issue. Just flip your HomePod over. You'll be okay.
Yeah, no, that's not a good idea. It's not a problem for me because we have it on a white shelf, so I haven't even really worried about it.
Another thing with audio quality before we move on here is I've noticed that there's a substantial difference between playing music from the HomePod, so through Apple Music or, playing a podcast versus AirPlaying it. The sound quality and the sound signature does change when that happens. I'm not sure what's going on, and it's been super inconsistent for me.
Oh, that's interesting. I have not done very much AirPlaying to our HomePod. I pretty much just ask it to play something, and it's kind of how I've handled it. I'll have to try that out and see. Is it possibly something to do with, like the music having to go to your, through the Wi-Fi to your phone and then over the Wi-Fi again to the HomePod? Or you're saying it's what could be causing that issue?
I have no idea, because sometimes when playing music directly on the HomePod, it sounds noticeably worse than playing it over AirPlay, but other times it's the other way around.
Oh, interesting.
Again, it sounds like another software bug with whatever software that's running on the HomePod.
I haven't looked into this, but do you know how the HomePod gets software updates? Is it something that you actually have to install, or do those just happen automatically from Apple?
It's through the Home app, and you would never figure it out because it's hidden somewhere that it took me a second to figure out when I got my HomePod. Basically, all you got to do is go into the Home app on any of your iOS devices, hit the little location-looking icon on the top left, and if you scroll down, there's a section for speakers, and it's a software update. And it's basically like running like a watchOS or an iOS update.
Oh, so you actually have to install it?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Mine, I just went there. Mine says install updates automatically, and that's the default.
Yeah. I typically have that option off on all my devices, so maybe that's on by default.
Yeah, I just went there for the first time. It says install updates automatically. That's the default setting, and then the description is keep HomePod up to date by installing the latest software automatically.
But from what I understand is you either update every HomePod individually, whether that's automatically or not, in pairs or the entire house. Which I assume if you have 5 HomePods like me, it would just install it on every single one of your HomePods whenever a software update is out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's talk about that for a second, though. The settings for the HomePod is very confusing, in my opinion. All of these settings is scattered around the Home app.
Yeah, I haven't even really looked at the settings. I know, it showed up as an option in... Oh, this HomePod is playing. Hey Siri, stop.
Probably
Sorry.
bleep that out during your show.
Yeah.
I've noticed my HomePods have been going off left and right on me this entire show, and I haven't said the buzzword the entire time. Yeah,
I'll definitely have to bleep that. I guess I was trying to go to the settings, and it automatically started playing. So I don't know. I don't understand what I did.
So I know exactly what that is if you don't 3D touch the tile, tapping it will just hit play and pause. It's a little media controller in the Home app.
Oh.
So if you don't 3D touch it, it'll start playing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as someone who has an Echo, the Echo settings are super confusing, and people talk a whole lot about how Echo has all these skills and stuff, and they are not intuitive at all to get set up. They're not intuitive to use, in my opinion. I've had 3 Echoes around the house for 9 months now and have never used any of the skills. And actually, a lot of people I've talked to haven't either. So I mean, I know some people get a lot of value out of them, and there is something to that, but they definitely have a user experience challenge ahead of them if they really want the average people to start using those skills on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I would consider myself pretty techie, and I got, I wasn't motivated to learn enough of how to get them all set up and how to get it, get through their bad UX.
So here's a task for
working.
you. Here's a task for you. Figure out how to turn off personal requests for HomePod without asking Siri for it, because it took me about half an hour to figure out where the setting was in the Home app.
Oh, wow. So I didn't turn it on when I did setup, so I haven't had to deal with that. Huh. Yeah,
it's
I don't
in the
know.
most unintuitive place you would think. What you gotta do
where is it?
So jump back into the Home app, hit the little location icon, and tap on the homeowner's name, and it's a setting in there to turn off.
Oh, wow.
HomePod.
Yeah, come on, Apple. That's not good.
Basically, in the HomePod itself, in the Home app, all it does is let you control Siri settings, and everything else is shoved into that little location icon, scattered all over there. Which, come on.
Yeah, I mean, the Home app definitely needs some work. But again, as somebody who has like quite a few different smart home devices and has had an Echo for a while, the competition there isn't very strong. Each device has its own app, and those are all confusing. At least all the ones that I've installed and used, and the same thing with the Echo app. And this is something that Apple should really, they have room here to excel. If they can make, the Home app something that's super easy to use, if they can expand HomeKit to be even more ubiquitous, I think they're doing a better job than they were maybe a year ago.
Yeah, definitely.
I see it on more and more devices, and I just made sure that whatever I bought worked for all of them because I wasn't sure who was going to win out. And I think that may end up kind of being how this goes moving forward, is that most of the manufacturers are just going to make it work with everybody so that, they have the biggest market possible. And even in homes, I wouldn't be surprised if people have, many different smart speakers in their home.
Right.
We have 2 different ones. And the one thing that we do use the Echo for that the HomePod can't do is order things on Amazon. So there's just like a handful of things that, like, if we run out of toilet paper or whatever, we'll just ask our Echo for that, and it'll order it and show up 2 days later or the next day or whatever, since we're here in San Francisco. And that is really handy. So we'll probably have one of those in our house for the foreseeable future just because of that one feature.
I mean, I can definitely see why that is a thing, and that's definitely something I've considered when buying all these HomePods. Is I'm a pretty big Amazon person myself, being from Seattle. Just like you, I can order anything 2 day, 1 day, sometimes even same day delivery. It's the intents for Siri is something that really bothers me with HomePod right now, is because going back to the whole audio thing with Airplay, the reason why I use Airplay so much is I like to do Overcast for a podcast instead of this podcast app. So I have to Airplay everything, all my podcasts to it. And that's not always the most convenient thing. One bug I did find with playing Overcast over Airplay is if you pause it on your phone for more than like 5 to 10 minutes and hit play again, the phone itself will say it's playing, but the HomePod won't actually be playing anything, which is really strange.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. That's, but I haven't really done very much Airplaying either.
See, it's a strange bug to me, only because I actually use a HomePod for Apple TV. I know it's not its main purpose, but I do use a HomePod for Apple TV, and that sticks to my Apple TV pretty well. So I'll have it, connected, go to bed at night, pick it up in the morning, and HomePod will still be connected and will still play. In fact, the only time where that HomePod is disconnected from my Apple TV is when you ask Siri to play music or podcasts through that HomePod specifically.
Yeah, that is still a bummer that it does that, but yeah, I that's actually better than I expected it to be. I kind of had heard that you shouldn't even try it with your Apple TV, but
I mean, the only bummer with the Apple TV is for some bizarre reason, the HomePod plays audio lower when connected to Apple TV than anywhere else, even AirPlaying from your phone. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe that's a bug they need to work out.
well, like lower in volume.
Lower in volume. So, like,
Okay.
for music that you play directly on the HomePod at like 30%, for example, you would need to crank it up to around 60% on Apple TV if you're playing music through the Apple TV to the HomePod.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's the reason why I would recommend getting two when stereo is out, because one HomePod in a relatively large living room won't do it justice.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, if we're talking about bugs here, I'm a pretty big person when it comes to bugs, and this is nothing new to me. Apple has been on this like strange like downfall with software quality apparently over the last couple of years. We even heard rumors that iOS 12 is supposed to be a software fix, and I'm really hoping that's the case, because not only HomePod but all my other Apple devices tend to be much buggier than they used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's something that a lot of different podcasts have talked about. It's something that I've noticed myself, and I think that was a Gurman rumor that iOS 12 was going to be, they removed some of the new features that they were working on and instead had their engineers focus on, cleaning up code, fixing as many bugs as possible, and making sure that iOS 12 is super, super stable, since it seems like for the past maybe 3 years, it's just iOS has gotten less and less stable.
See, for me, it goes further than that. It goes all the way back to iOS 7.
Yeah, I've heard people say that. I haven't had that experience personally, but yeah, I guess that's another part of like a part of the issue is they do have so many users that have so many different situations that even if for me it hasn't been a big deal, it could still be a massive number of users who had bugs in iOS 7 and 8 and they first started really affecting me in 9, 10, and now 11.
See, for me, it's always been, and I'll keep bringing this up because it's an issue that I can easily show other people, is frame rate issues on iOS has been an issue since 7, and a good example of that would be, what's a good example? If you just scroll in the Messages app, like on the main page, and just let go, you'll start to see it stutter a little bit as it's starting to slow down. Or like just the initial scroll between the first page and like the widgets kind of stutters a little bit when you first scroll it over.
Yeah, I do not have that on my phone. What phone do you have?
iPhone 10.
Okay, yeah, me too. Yeah, I did notice the stutter in Messages, but I don't see it. I don't see it in the other section.
I mean, it's highly inconsistent as well, which really bothers me. Is sometimes you can replicate it, sometimes you can't. In certain scenarios, it's like night and day. Like you'll see it every single time.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the common thread with their the bugginess that we've seen in iOS and macOS is that it's not necessarily every time, and they're not necessarily hugely egregious things. There's just inconsistency, and that inconsistency is frustrating for people who are Apple users, because a big reason why at least I became interested in Apple and started buying Apple products is because compared to the competition, they had seriously better software and incredibly consistent software. And now we're beginning to see more and more inconsistencies as their software does expand. I mean, like the scope of the software that they now create is significantly larger, but as a consumer, it doesn't really matter how much software they're making. We care about whether the thing that we purchased is consistent and good and high quality software.
Right. And for me, it's more of like in my head, it's like if Apple didn't think about doing it, they don't do it. So, like, for example, here's one that I can replicate on every single iOS device I've had since iOS 7. Call up Siri on your phone and then swipe down for Control Center. And the animation just stutters the entire way. And I can repeat that on every single iOS device I've had over the years. It's I'm getting really heated right now, but it really does frustrate me with the amount of issues. Because I'm a perfectionist, so like when it comes to things like looking at things on screen or like listening to something, I need it to be perfect. And that's ultimately why I became an Apple user. Was just the amount of care they put into their operating systems and the hardware.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's what I was getting at too. Is they kind of set themselves up for this frustration that is now coming out of the Apple community, in that they did set a really, really high bar for themselves for so long, and they continued to hit it. And there is some, looking back with rose-colored glasses, I'm sure there have always been bugs and there have always been issues, but it just seems like maybe it's because they're even iOS devices and all of our Apple devices are becoming more and more part of our lives, even more so than just 5 years ago, because we have them. What I can do with my phone is so much greater. How much work I do on my phone is so much greater. Having AirPods and listening to things with that, and that having software bugs, and now having a HomePod and all of these other things that are kind of just filling my life with Apple devices, means that there are more chances for me to notice issues, and they also have a bigger impact because I expect to see that same level of perfection that I saw when I first bought a Mac heading to college, and I was not having bugs. I was not having issues with that Mac. It lasted all the way through school and was an awesome computer, and I never had issues, and I restarted it like once every 5 months, and now my laptop I have to restart once a week or so, or it starts to have issues when I try to log in.
Right.
And that type of thing is frustrating. But I think the reason the frustration is as high as it is what I was getting at there, is that now that Apple has become such an embedded part of many people's lives, that those issues and those little bugs or little frustrations, they just kind of nag at you.
I mean, I'm not here to say that, Apple used to be perfect, because no software is perfect. However, it does seem like they are slacking a little bit, in the sense that, we'll report bugs as users to Apple, and they'll say that someone else has already reported no issue, and then revision after revision, those bugs aren't getting fixed.
Yeah, and as somebody who I am a product manager, and I do manage priorities of software developers in my day job, and I understand that oftentimes the developers themselves, or even the product people, don't have complete control over how much time they spend on bug fixing versus how much time they spend on new features. That's usually set by executives or managing big initiatives throughout the company, at least in my company. And I would assume it's similar within Apple, that some executive or higher up manager at Apple is setting the pace for what needs to be completed by a given release. And what that means is that the developers are having to prioritize those new features above whatever massive list of bugs there are there. And it sounds like for iOS 12, what they've done is they've removed some of those new feature priorities, and that just allows those developers and engineers that they already had to focus on that big list of bugs that has been sitting there. It's just not been prioritized.
See, when news broke that iOS 12 was going to be a bug fix, for me, it was like no issue. Like, yes, please do this. But I did hear an uproar in the community, only because that Gurman report mentioned a new home screen for the iPhone.
Yeah.
And then it kind of flopped. Like, all these people who wanted bug fixes in the operating system suddenly went oh wait, I want a new home screen instead. Push the home screen. And
yeah, and
I'm just sitting here
and that's the problem that product people and executives at Apple have, is if they do a year where it is bug fixes, the tech press is going to say that Apple isn't innovating anymore, that their software isn't moving fast enough, that they're behind their competitors. Like that is what's going to happen. So what Apple has to do is figure out what the right balance is. And it seems like whatever they have going on there hasn't been the right balance, in that they've allowed too many bugs out, but they can't go too far the other way either and just fix a whole bunch of bugs but not add any new features, because those new features are a big part of selling new iPhones, selling new iPads.
And just upgradability in general.
Yeah, like, just upgradability.
Even in software. A lot more people will upgrade their devices if something as silly as new Animoji or a new emoji are added. But at the same time, those software releases might have fixes for like major security holes. I know outside of, us tech people, a lot of people don't really keep their phones up to date, even on iOS. I've noticed.
Yeah, that's one thing I've never understood. Whenever updates come, I automatically install them on all my devices. But a lot of people, even tech people, who especially on Mac, they won't install the new version of macOS and for 6-7 months.
On Mac, it's different because there's a lot of third-party code that could potentially break when upgrading, especially in the professional field. Good example was the issue we were having before this call started, when we were having issues with my microphone not working. I'm pretty sure that's a software issue. But on iOS, it's a different story because everything runs through the App Store, and Apple would know better to not break it, as they would know better to break as little apps as possible when doing software updates, especially like point releases.
Right, yeah, it's true.
I mean, going back to that balance though, it feels like Apple is now over-promising a lot of stuff and not really delivering on anything. Good example is iCloud.
Yeah, it seemed
messages in iCloud, which is now finally arriving.
Is it actually coming?
It's present in the 11.3 beta, which I am admittedly running.
And is it the final version of 11.3? Like that's actually what's going to come out?
It's in the betas right now, and there's been 3 betas so far, and it hasn't been removed yet. So it looks like it's going to ship with 11.3, especially because they have all these welcome screens for the feature.
Okay, well, good, but that was announced last WWDC.
Just now, 9 months ago.
Yeah, 9 months ago. And Airplay 2 was announced at the same time, I believe, and that
seems to be
it's coming.
See, here's my theory on Airplay 2 is it's going to have a similar release schedule as HomePod did, and what AirPods was, is since they're announcing later this year, which means anytime in 2018, my theory is it's going to ship in like January or February of 2019.
Airplay 2 is?
Yeah. Just based on what their recent history with releases. I have a good feeling it'll be like a 12.3 release when that finally ships, as long as that sounds.
Wow. Yeah, that sucks.
Because from what I heard from people who tried Airplay 2 when it was present in the beta, it was super buggy, didn't really work that well, and it overheated your phone. So it sounds like Airplay 2 still has a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I was going to ask if you have AirPods.
I do have AirPods, and that's actually a funny story because unlike HomePod, which sounds amazing, I carry AirPods everywhere with me, but only to use it for 3 things: phone calls, podcasts, and audiobooks.
You just can't handle listening to music with them?
Nope.
What do you use for music?
I currently am carrying the Bowers & Wilkins PX, which are my personal pair of headphones, and it is the reason why my Twitter bio says recovering audiophile.
Oh, okay. I don't really know anything about them. Are they over-ear headphones, I'm assuming?
They're over-ear headphones, and the reason why I am now a recovering audiophile is because for the longest time, I refused to ditch the wire. And even when iPhone 7 came out, the entire release cycle of the 7, I carried around a dongle and a pair of headphones everywhere I went for music and everything. And that could get pretty ridiculous after a while. And with the PXs, they are Bluetooth, which is my first official step into Bluetooth. And I gotta say, they don't sound that bad.
Cool. Yeah, I use the AirPods for basically everything, and I've really liked them a lot. They seem to be, at least mine, they've gotten a little bit worse at switching between devices for me. When I first got them, they switch between devices really quickly, and now it seems to like kind of sometimes it just connects right away, and sometimes you have to kind of like tap it a couple times and get it to connect when you're switching devices. But otherwise, they work really well, especially when I'm just using my phone and I have them connected to my phone the vast majority of the time. They work perfectly for me, and I use them every single day. I think the biggest frustration I have with them now is how the linty and like scratched up
I was going to ask you about your case.
Yeah, so I wear jeans basically every day, and so they just have this like lint in them, and I've cleaned them a bunch of different times. But who wants to clean their headphones? We were talking about it today on Twitter, just a handful of us, and sharing like the pictures of our headphones. And
mine has gotten pretty bad.
Yeah, one of the guys said he goes to like a machine shop every week to work. And so he's like machining metals. I think it's like a hobby or whatever. So he showed his, and the magnets in the AirPods were just like pulling the little scraps of metal that he gets in his pockets or whatever from machining.
I have that same issue.
So I don't think mine is metal. I think mine is, well, I don't know exactly what's on mine, but
there's
it definitely has.
You're talking about the two little like lines, right? When you first open the AirPods case on each side of the case. That's metal shavings.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why you can't just wipe it off with like a shirt or something.
Yeah, that's what mine has too. But his was significantly worse than mine because he does that. But he goes to a machine shop.
Mine has gotten so bad that there's like a little indent where those are now, where the shavings live. So even when I clean them off, you can still see like the little scuffs in the casing now. It's created a permanent scuff in my case.
Yeah, mine has too. And then the outside of it isn't really pure white anymore. It's kind of like blue.
I mean, mine are still white, but it's pretty dented from like the multiple times I've dropped the case.
Yeah. I mean, mine's it's white, but it's like a tinted white. It's kind of got a blue tint to it. That said, as we're like complaining about this case, it is incredible. I've really, really enjoyed.
It's a super durable case. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. I mean, it's tiny. I charge the case like, I don't know, a couple times a week, and I use the AirPods all day long. And it's been incredible. I listen to more things than I ever did before because of the convenience that it adds to just putting it in my ear and going on a walk around the building or in between meetings or something, listening to music or a podcast or whatever. And before, I wouldn't have gone through the trouble of getting headphones out and untangling the cord and plugging it in.
See, you might not know about this about me, but I am now all in on wireless. So with wireless headphones now, AirPods, my phone charges through Qi and everything. I actually have a little adapter for my AirPods case that when it's running low on battery, I plug in the adapter and just charge it on one of my Qi chargers. As ridiculous as that sounds. That's a little bit
ridiculous. Yeah, that's a little ridiculous.
Actually, fun fact, it's actually much harder to find I scramble for a lightning cable more than I should. And that's why I have the adapters, because I don't have any lightning cables around anymore. As weird as that sounds, being in the Apple ecosystem, I don't really have lightning cables at all anymore. I've gotten rid of all of them.
You know, I haven't bought a Qi charger. I know a lot of my coworkers and friends have them, but Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Do you
It's
have
just
one that you
super
recommend?
convenient. One that I recommend is I actually believe right now, pre AirPower, the best Qi charger for your iPhone is actually the Samsung convertible charger.
Oh, okay. Send me a link to that and I'll put it in the show notes just in case anybody's interested.
One, it's USB-C, so that fits well with my MacBook Pro, and I can just have the cable running directly into my machine. And two, it can lay flat and also can prop up your phone at the same time, which is something that's really convenient for desk use.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll check it out. Speaking of AirPower, do you know when that is coming out?
Rumor has it sometime in March, but I'm hoping that it does come in March, but also rumors have also suggested that the pricing of that is going to be ridiculous, somewhere in the $150 to $200 range.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get that.
I mean, I will only because I love Apple products and I'm trying to get rid of every single cable I can possibly have. As ridiculous as that sounds as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to let me know what you think of it when you get it.
When the 12-inch MacBook came out, I got rid of all USB-A cables. As ridiculous as that sounds, then I upgraded to the MacBook Pro with Touch Bar, which has more USB-C ports, so that's good on me. And then when Apple announced that they were going to do wireless charging for the iPhones, I got rid of all my lightning cables.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like you actually gave them away or threw them away?
It'd probably take me a couple hours to figure out where a lightning cable is in my house right now.
Oh, wow.
If that's any indication.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I still have the older version of the MacBook Pro 15-inch that I use for work. I don't really plug that many things into it through USB, other than I guess this mic I'm using is plugged in. But apart from that, I use a monitor at work that's HDMI, but otherwise I don't really plug anything into my Mac. So I don't think the transition to the new USB would be a huge issue for me, other than some of the other issues that they've had with the new MacBook Pros. But
also,
yeah,
fun
I don't
fact,
think that transition in particular would be a problem.
Also, fun fact, when I did move to wireless headphones, I specifically picked a pair of headphones that charge via USB-C, so it's USB-C on both ends. So right now, the headphones I'm using for this podcast is the PXs, like I mentioned earlier. And it has a headphone jack, but I've never used it. And it's currently being wired through USB-C.
Oh, interesting.
If you don't think I'm crazy yet, that'll be an indication for you. I'm actually quite disappointed that this year's iPhones weren't USB-C.
Yeah, there were definitely some rumors that might happen, but yeah, I would be surprised if they do that. It's a pretty significant change.
And to round out this entire conversation about the HomePod and the iPhones and everything, I'm not afraid to say this. I am this year more than ever considering switching to Android.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that, and a lot of people that I know who are trying out Android. What Android device would you choose?
Probably, and the only reason, ironically enough, that I haven't looked that deep into it is the current Pixel line of phones don't support wireless charging, as ridiculous as that sounds.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
I've been looking at the Pixel 2 XL increasingly as the days go on. That checks every box that isn't wireless charging for me.
I think the biggest issue with me with switching would be apps. I have quite a few apps that I use all the time that are iOS only. And I guess that would probably be the most difficult thing, is going through and finding which apps there are Android counterparts to that are high enough quality for what I want. And I know there's a lot of good ones out there, and there's a lot of good resources out there for switching. And I think it's kind of sad that there have been so many conversations like that.
I mean, it's easier said than done. You bring up a good point about apps. That'd be one reason why I wouldn't switch. Also, iMessage is a huge part. I use iMessage every day, and I have a brother who is all in on Android and Windows and everything, and seeing him like struggle to use multiple chat applications just to talk to people, like that's something I don't want to get into. I'd rather just stick with iMessage.
Yeah. No, I agree. I do, and I still end up using more than one just because, I have family that uses WhatsApp and stuff like that. But iMessage is definitely my go-to, and it's really nice that it's on the Mac, and even WhatsApp is on the Mac. So like
Somewhat on the Mac.
Kind of,
Not
yeah,
completely.
it works well enough for what I need it for. I think that would be a pretty hard transition for me to make. But the fact that so many people who have been longtime Apple fans are even considering it shows the issue that they're running into. Saying that, I wonder if it is primarily the Apple, what you would call maybe the power users of the iPhone that are interested in switching, and a lot of who their primary base of users is just normal people out there. The numbers that I've seen, at least reading some of the stuff over at TechPinions, I don't have them in front of me, but the last that I saw over there, Apple is still getting more people coming from Android than users switching from iOS over to Android. So that says something.
Yeah.
I mean, even if our group of people is frustrated and about to move, it doesn't seem to have trickled down to the general population at this point.
I think with the general population, though, I think it's more of they're familiar with one or the other. So they're either familiar with iOS or familiar with Android, and that if they switch away, they feel like they don't know how to use, the other side. So
I mean, this same thing for me, right? Even though I like learning new software, there's a high switching cost because there's things that I know how to do on iOS that I don't know as much how to do on Android, and people who are going the other way around have the same issue. But I think it's interesting that Apple has kind of consistently had a higher number of people stick with their devices and more people move from Android to iOS. I think that's typically because the iOS devices have been aspirational devices for people who couldn't afford an iOS device.
Right.
And they always wanted one, but because Apple doesn't really sell a cheap iPhone, I know they have older phones that they still sell that hit lower price points, but as far as their flagship phones, they don't sell a cheap phone, and their whole competition does. I saw numbers the other day that was Apple's average selling price was somewhere around $700.
Yep.
Last quarter.
Closer to 800 now.
Yeah, it was like high 700s, and Android devices were around 200. Samsung was like 2 something, and they were all right in the 200s range.
Yep.
250, 270, stuff like that. So even though people often consider like Samsung to be a direct rival of Apple, and they are, with the Galaxy line of phones, the vast majority of phones that Samsung sells are not their high-end flagships that are reviewed by major sites.
Right.
It's mostly their cheap phones that we wouldn't even really know the name of.
Yeah.
That most people are buying. And I think that is actually what leads to that switching, more people switching from Android, is people have chosen Android not because some people have chosen Android not because it was their favorite, but because it was the best thing at the price point that they could afford. And so once they can afford something more, they chose Apple over the high-end Samsung or high-end Pixel.
How's your iPhone 10, by the way?
It's great. Yeah, it's really good. I haven't had any issues with it really at all. Face ID works really well for me. The swipe interface is great. It feels weird when I pick up my wife's 7 Plus, and yeah, no, I haven't really had any issues at all. What about you?
I couldn't say the same for myself. Face ID is great. It's so great that I'm afraid of like ever restoring my phone because of the neural network and the training it's done on me, having to be redone. Like that's something I'm afraid of when I get a new phone. Believe it or not.
Yeah. I hope that they come up with a way to send that over to the new phone.
Right.
Because that's some valuable stuff there.
Yeah. Face ID is great. However, software is kind of wonky. My status bar especially is like the place of like bugs galore. Like certain icons will go bigger than they should be or smaller than they should be, having status bar icons disappear on me. At some point, I had the entire status bar disappear on me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I haven't had any of those issues. That's interesting.
I've had my phone completely lock up on me because like the entire lock screen bugged out. So like you couldn't really swipe up to get anywhere. I've taken way too many accidental screenshots.
Yeah, that I definitely do. Every time, I think I tweeted it the other day, I had like, it's like 50 something times that I've accidentally screenshotted my alarm. Just my alarm, because in the morning I hit the side button to snooze, and sometimes I'll just hit both and I'll have a screenshot of my alarm going off.
I've actually had my phone lock on me or bring up Siri multiple times on accident while trying to pick up my phone. In fact, I've actually turned off the physical Siri button, and that seems to fix the issue. I don't know if you've run into that where like you're trying to grab your phone and like your thumb accidentally hits the side button and you're trying to hold on for your life so it doesn't lock your phone and brings up Siri instead. I have that completely disabled, and that seems to fix the issue.
Yeah, no, I haven't had that issue. So I guess that's good on my end. But overall, I really like the phone.
Which color do you have, by the way?
I have the white.
So do
or
I.
Whatever it's called.
It's silver.
Silver, yeah.
It's silver for the phone, but white for the HomePod.
Right. Yeah, no, I do like it a lot, and I think it's a really impressive feat of engineering. But Apple definitely has some, software improvements that they need to make. It sounds like with iOS 12, at least the rumors sound like they're going to focus on fixing those issues and making sure that their software across the board is more consistent. They fix as many of the bugs as possible, and it'll be interesting to see if they actually do that.
Right. I really hope so, because if iOS 12 doesn't live up to fixing bugs, and probably will like try out an Android phone at some point in the near future.
Yeah.
If that's really the case, because the software on iOS is just getting a little too ridiculous at this point.
Yeah. So I want to end the show with a new question that, it kind of ties into the tagline of the show. Unco is a podcast about what's unusual in tech. So you're going to be the first person I ask this, but I want this to be kind of like a repeating question that I ask each week. What is one thing that you find unusual in tech right now?
I mean, it's a loaded question, obviously, but since I do, write for 9to5Mac primarily, I am in the Apple ecosystem. This will primarily be an answer toward that herd of people.
Yeah, and that's fine. Each guest is going to have their own focus.
And for me, in the Apple ecosystem, what's unusual is just the port situation in the Apple ecosystem is just a complete mess. And I feel like that's... I know I've beaten this horse to death, like, on the show already and in all my past shows. But, like, it's ridiculous that when you buy a new phone, you can't plug that into your brand new computer, your brand new MacBook Pro. That's, to me...
Right.
That is absolutely ridiculous, and I feel like Apple has some cleaning up to do here.
Yeah, I agree. I think I hope we are in a transition period where Apple has an end state in mind, and next year we will understand what they've been doing and it'll all make sense. But right now it is definitely confusing and frustrating with USB-C on all the new Macs, still having older ports on the iMac and Lightning everywhere else. It's kind of all over the place, and people needing all these dongles, and it's become very frustrating for people who have certain use cases. I know for me, I don't really plug that many things in, and so I have the older Mac, and I have all of my Apple devices are powered with Lightning, so I haven't really gotten into that mess yet because I haven't upgraded my Mac. But for people who do have the newest version of everything, they're in a weird spot. You're in a weird spot for sure, and hopefully that's not a spot that stays around very long, and this is just this is just a bummer of a year, and next year they'll, kind of have that stuff worked out with the changes that they make in ports and
See, here's the thing. Here's the thing with USB-C specifically is if you go all in on USB-C like I have, the unfortunate part is you can't necessarily reverse USB-C to be backwards compatible with other devices. So if you're someone like me who just carries USB-C everywhere and you go to someone else's computer, you can't necessarily just plug in like a USB-C to USB-A adapter into someone else's computer and use it. It doesn't work like that, and any adapters claiming to do so is highly dangerous.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that.
So it seems like in that specific scenario, the best thing to do is just to get dongles and not make my mistake of replacing every single one of your cables with USB-C. Unless you don't plan on plugging anything else into anyone else's computers. I definitely see where Apple's going with this, though, is a wireless feature where there's nothing, where you don't have to plug in anything. But right now, that it's really frustrating.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. I mean, there's not really a reason where I need to plug my phone into my computer or like anything else into my computer. I just plug things into charging docks or cords coming out of the wall, and I plug my computer into a monitor and this mic, but that's really it. So I think for me, having one USB adapter and an HDMI adapter would kind of be fine, and I don't think I would have that many issues. But I know a lot of people who are photographers or have a lot of stuff that they need to plug in for different reasons, and they're having to carry a bunch of different dongles, and it's a big frustration.
Yeah, and that's not just Mac specific. On the iPhone, it ships with wired headphones, and other than your iPhone or iPad, for that fact, you can't really plug those headphones in anywhere else.
Right? Yeah, that's true.
And I can see the frustration with like average users, because Lightning and USB-C look very similar to the average person, and I've actually had quite a few people try to plug in their Lightning headphones to their USB-C MacBook and then realize, oh, this isn't the same port.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's frustrating, I'm sure.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, it was nice to have you on the show, Peter.
Yeah, for sure.
Where can people find you on the internet?
I'm mostly on Twitter, so you can find me on Twitter at iPeterCao. That's IPETERCAO, in case anyone was curious on how to say my last name. Turns out a lot of people don't, including my coworkers who mentioned me on here's a plug for you, the 9 to 5 Mac Happy Hour podcast, and that led me to add that to my bio just now.
I actually, before this started, I went and I read that because I didn't know how to pronounce your last name, and that is how I knew how to pronounce it at the beginning of the show.
Perfect. Other than that, you can reach me by email at peter@9to5mac.com. I'm not really anywhere else. I mean, I have an Instagram account that's never published anything, so if you want to follow me there, it's the same exact handle as my Twitter handle. I'm not in the position to announce anything, but I will be on a future podcast that I am producing, possibly, if everything lines up.
Cool. Well, we will, definitely let me know when that comes out, and I'll check it out.
For sure.
Yeah, and you can follow Unco on Twitter at _UncoFM, and you can support Unco by becoming a member of the Unco community at our website, unco.fm. And you can subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
HomePod.
Yeah, HomePod. You can also stay up to date with my writing over at timothybuck.me or by following me on Twitter at timothybucksf. Thank you all for taking the time to listen, and thanks again, Peter, for coming on the show.
Yeah, for sure.
Bye, everyone.